Well, we are back with another episode of the Chris McPherson Show. This one will be a little different with it being the holiday period, Christmas and New Year right upon us, and the end of 2024 being nigh. We thought we'd kick things off this week and start our countdown of the 24 biggest or most impactful sporting events of 2024. We thought it was a nice little way to tie off the year and wrap things up. Certainly, in terms of this year, it's been a big year for us, getting started, getting our first 10 episodes out and having you all on board. So we thank you for that. As we touched on last week, make sure to get around all of our social media channels. We are, of course, on X or Twitter, The Chris Mack Show. You can find us on TikTok as well. YouTube is where all of our episodes are dropped weekly, Thursdays at 6 p.m. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook as well. Again, just search for The Chris Mack Show or The Chris McPherson Show in full. Of course, with our YouTube channel, make sure that you do like and subscribe to the channel to keep you up to date and hit the bell so that you get all the notifications when we are going with our premieres or when new shorts and reels are dropping. We love all the feedback, so jump into the comments as well and let us know what you're thinking in terms of the content that we're putting out and what you'd like to hear or see in terms of the future and as we head into 2025 or some guests that you might like to see on the show that we'll endeavour to go and get. But as I said, we're going to hit it into the top 24 sporting events of 2024, the biggest, most impactful moments, events and outcomes across the year as judged by a few of our hosts and co-hosts that feature on a regular basis, myself, our producer JR Carter, Lockie Avil, Mr. Consistent, and Mr. Versatile, Brodie Burrows, all getting in, and you'll see all of their faces as we go through the countdown over the next couple of weeks. But we thought we would start it off in reverse order and start with number 24. And while the announcement of number 24 in David Warner's Test cricket retirement didn't happen in 2024, his final innings did at the SCG in January, and we thought it fitting to get things started there. Warner announced mid-2023 that he would be bringing his Test career to an end, and then he continued on throughout the end of the Australian Test series as we got to that Test in Sydney on his home turf at the SCG. And what a moment it was. Not everyone gets to dictate their farewell. Many argued he shouldn't have got to dictate his Test farewell. But it's a matter of history now that he did get to say goodbye at the SCG. And it was great to see him get the home farewell after such a long period of service to the Australian cricket team. It followed later in the year that he did retire, of course, from all international cricket, and we now just see him going around in T20 leagues around the world, including our Big Bash that goes on at the moment where he captains the Sydney Thunder. But a phenomenal career. He's been one of the leading lights in a period that's been a bit of a roller coaster at different points for the Australian Test team, and we doff our caps to David Warner, coming in at number 24. Following Dave at number 24, at number 23, this one a little more controversial rather than positive, and it was Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, not all that long ago, back on the 15th of November US time. This fight, and I'll use that term very loosely, took place over in Arlington, Texas, where it was questioned whether or not it should have been signed off, whether the fight should have been commissioned. And you'd have to say the end product suggested otherwise. We had Mike Tyson coming up against YouTuber Jake Paul. And it was a unanimous decision, certainly for Jake Paul. It was far from convincing. Mike Tyson, 58 years old when the fight took place. Jake Paul, just 27 years old. 31 years of difference. A fast might have been generous in terms of how we described it. We certainly picked it apart on the show earlier in the year, and it wasn't pretty. Tyson maybe held his own for the first couple of rounds, his pure boxing pedigree getting him there, but his legs just took toll. And it was a sad indictment on boxing as a sport, and we touched on it with Brodie Burrows on the show. Unfortunately, it will go down in the memory as one of the momentous occasions, one of the things that sticks in the memory of 2024. Hopefully, for Mike Tyson's sake, it's certainly the last time we see him fight, because it did slightly diminish the final memories for a modern generation of one of the all-time great heavyweights of world boxing. Going from negative to positive, we come in at number 22. And it is New South Wales coming back to win the State of Origin series after that start that was horrific, if nothing else, on their home turf. They lost that first game. Joseph Suaalii was sent off less than 8 minutes into the match. They lost 38-10 in the first match there in Sydney. It was an absolute clinic from the Queenslanders once they were playing against 12, and certainly Suaalii was deserving of a send-off. There was a lot of controversy on it at the time, but it was pretty clear-cut with the benefit of hindsight, that's for sure. So certainly, as we said, 6 tries to 2 in that first game, and it looked like New South Wales were going to be pushing the proverbial uphill to make any sort of comeback. No, they had to head to Melbourne for Game 2 and then finish the series in Queensland. When they went to Melbourne, they blew Queensland off the park. 6 first-half tries saw them lead 34-0 at halftime, and the fight was all but over. The series was level. Mitchell Moses absolutely stood up. We saw a bit of biff as well. Liam Martin and Carrigan from Queensland going to the bin. But then it headed to Suncorp, and this is where New South Wales did their best. They trailed 2-0 after a penalty goal to Valentine Holmes in the first half. 2-0 at the break. And then back-to-back tries, as well as a penalty goal just after halftime, saw them open out and extend out to a 14-4 winning margin. It was gritty. It wasn't pretty. There was we saw Jeremiah Nanai and Cameron Murray go to the sin bin by referee Ashley Klein. They both got charged with contrary conduct for their efforts and displays. But again, New South Wales did what mattered most, and that was chalking that series win against the odds in Queensland. It was an impressive effort. Dylan Edwards came into his own once he took that jersey in Game 2, and it was certainly one for the memory book for rugby league fans, especially those in Sky Blue. Speaking of wins against the odds, let's move on to number 21 in the countdown, and it was New Zealand claiming their first Cricket World Cup. They won the Women's T20 World Cup, and they did so quite impressively after getting through second in the group. They sat behind Australia. Australia stumbled against the South Africans in the semi-finals. New Zealand, comprehensive winners over the West Indies in the end, winning by 8 runs, but certainly dominating that game in Sharjah in the semi-final before they came up against South Africa in the final. South Africa looking to shed their tag of big tournament chokers. They couldn't do it, though. Both teams are looking to win their maiden ICC T20 trophy. New Zealand was sent into bat. They set 158 for 5, and South Africa, they struggled to get within striking distance, falling 32 runs short in the end, just 126 off their 20 overs. There was certainly a really strong showing from the New Zealanders to win it. Again, 32-run winning margin. Not the most comprehensive you've ever seen, but certainly a strong margin. There was plenty of contributions from the bat for New Zealand. The usual suspects, Susie Bates and Amelia Kerr, 32 and 43 respectively. Brooke Halliday, a 38-run cameo at a strike rate of 135 as well. And then with the ball for the Kiwis, it was Rosemary Mayer with 3 wickets who starred for them. She took 3 for 25, opening the bowling. Amelia Kerr, 3 for 24, an all-round effort. And Amelia Kerr, deservingly, was the player of the final and the MVP out of the tournament. She was also the player of the series with 135 runs and 15 wickets, and a phenomenal all-rounder for the New Zealanders, and a deserving win in the T20 World Cup. They might be our rivals across the ditch, but it was nice to see them break the duck while South Africa continued their big tournament woes. Coming in at number 20 to reel out our first 5, it was Spygate, the Dronegate at the Olympics. The Canadian soccer team were discovered to be using drone surveillance to spy on a training session for the New Zealand women's national football team at the Summer Olympics. It was certainly a surprise for many in Paris. It was against a number of French laws, let alone against the spirit of the Olympics. And it was quite puzzling. Canada, a strong team in the women's. New Zealand, not nearly as far up the rankings. So it was quite bizarre to see them doing that. There was immediate action taken and consequences. The people involved, staffer or analyst Joseph Lombardi, head coach Bev Priestman, was sent home from the Olympics. Assistant coach Andy Spence had to take charge of the first game and then got installed as coach eventually once Priestman was sent home. Lombardi was given an 8-month suspended prison sentence. This was a serious incident in the football world are as serious as they get when we look at these sorts of things at the amateur level that the Olympics are supposed to be. Obviously not with the women's football because we've got professional athletes there, but certainly very poor. It also meant that Canada were deducted points. It made it very challenging for them to progress through, and it meant that they were up against, I guess, the proverbial to try and qualify through. And we saw how that played out throughout the group stages for the Canadian national team. It really challenged them, the benefit being that multiple teams from certain pools got through, and they did manage to finish second thanks to winning all three of their games, despite the 6-point deduction. New Zealand not winning a single game, and they missed the qualifying finals after that. So Canada then came up against Germany and missed out on penalties. So it fell short of the medals, but again, a black eye on women's football at the Olympics, and Canada go down in history as the team known for drone spying and getting caught in Paris 2024, and that earns them number 20 on our list. Well, coming in at number 19 in our countdown, the cries of "It's coming home" echoed around UEFA Euro 2024 tournament. The tournament, hosted every 4 years, was hosted in Germany this time around, and England were very confident heading in. They found themselves drawn in Group C of the tournament, and it certainly looked like they were setting themselves up well. They started with a 1-0 win over Serbia before draws against Denmark and Slovenia saw all three of those sides, England, Denmark and Slovenia, advance to the knockout stages as undefeated sides, which was great to see. For English fans, they went through as the top side, as the only side to have a win in the group after Denmark and Slovenia also drew their games against each other, as well as with Serbia. England went through, Denmark second and Slovenia third. That set up England on a run. They looked at the draw and thought it shaped well if they could get past Italy as the expected quarter-finalist after they drew Slovakia in the round of 16. And with the heavyweights of Spain, Germany, Portugal, France and Belgium on the other side, England certainly were confident. And unsurprisingly so, they managed to beat Slovakia 2-1, admittedly in extra time. The big surprise in their little segment of the draw, though, Switzerland 2-0 winners over Italy, which meant that England then shaped up against Switzerland in the quarterfinals in Dusseldorf. Again, England getting through. Again, it had to go beyond regulation time, this time going to penalties. England winning 5-3. They then headed to Dortmund a few days later into the semi-finals. The Netherlands was the opponent. England this time managed to get the job done in regulation time. A penalty in the 18th minute to Harry Kane, and then an icing of the game in the 90th minute to Oliver Watkins meant that they went through after trailing after just 7 minutes, 2-1 through to the final, where they came up against the powerhouse of Spain. Still confident, still claiming that it was coming home despite the drought that they face, that we know has really overshadowed them in major tournaments for so long. England headed into another Euros final, this time not on home soil, this time in Germany, looking for a win, looking for a trophy to take home. The opening goal went the way of the Spanish, Nicholas Williams, getting the first just after half-time. A little while later, Cole Palmer managed to get one back for the English, and heading deep into the game, it was locked at 1-1 in front of a massive crowd of over 65,000 in Berlin. But it wasn't to be, with Mikel Oyarzabal getting the goal for the Spanish 4 minutes from the expiration of regulation time to send the Spaniards into raptures. They sealed it from there. They managed to cling to that goal lead, and that was enough to hand Euro 2024 to the Spanish and resign the English to at least another 2, if not another 4 years of misery before anything will be coming home. And that comes in at 19 on our list of the top 24 or most momentous events of 2024. Coming in at number 18 was early in the year, in February, pre the Formula One season. It was announced that Lewis Hamilton would make a move from Mercedes to Ferrari. It was a shock switch. It meant that all of a sudden both those Ferrari drivers were on tenterhooks, although there wasn't too many questions in terms of who was going to go, and it ended up being Carlos Sainz in the end. But it meant that Hamilton had a farewell season in the Mercedes. He now becomes a championship contender again, you would have to think, in Ferrari. Although after a tough 2024, where they didn't quite measure up and couldn't quite match it with the powerhouse of Red Bull, and even towards the back end of the season with McLaren, they finished down the order a little. Ferrari will be looking to improve on that in season 2025 as they look at their new driver lineup for the Formula One season that is ahead, with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc at the helm as they look to set themselves back as the premier team, the prancing horse from Maranello, looking to dominate in 2025. Moving on from 18 to 17, and it was monster contract time in the Major League Baseball. We saw at the end of 2023, Shohei Ohtani signed that massive $700 million deal, but all of a sudden that was eclipsed late this year as Juan Soto signed a $765 million contract with the New York Mets, the biggest contract in baseball history, and it sets him up. It will give him $75 million up front and an additional almost $47 million over the next season before he continues on with that contract over its length. It's a huge deal being signed by Soto, and it certainly starts to put things in perspective, knowing that they've snatched him out from under the Yankees' radar, and they made it clear that that was always their target, a 15-year, $765 million deal. It was surprising for many because many thought he would end up at the Yankees, but the Mets snagged him, as I said, a $75 million signing bonus, and then between $46 to $47 million a year, essentially through from 2025 through to 2039. Not bad signing a 15-year deal where your worst performing year is going to be $42.5 million for playing contract. It's certainly going to be a great time to be Juan Soto over the next 15 years. We go into number 16, which will be the final piece of this week's episode, and it is certainly the boxing gender debate at the Olympics. This reared its ugly head when Iman Khalif, the Algerian boxer who was born female and assigned female at birth, had been previously eliminated from other tournaments due to high testosterone readings. The IOC, however, ruled that she was eligible to compete at the Paris Olympics alongside Lin Yuting, the Taiwanese boxer who'd been disqualified from the 2023 World Championships. They ruled that both boxers eligible to compete in the Paris Olympics because they're assigned female at birth and identify as women. However, the debate over gender eligibility tests in sport continued on, some arguing that those arbitrary and possibly unfair tests do scrutinise women very differently to men. They don't take into account the range of health conditions that can impact people's gender presentation, and it's certainly an interesting one. It's going to rage on for some time to come. It impacts, obviously, the levels when we look at trans and cis women in sports and how they can all participate. It's certainly something that we struggle to pull apart. I don't think there is a clear-cut answer. It seems that the IOC rules of if you're born a female, you participate as a female seem pretty straightforward. However, when you start to dig into the underlying pieces of hormone levels and other participation pieces, it's certainly a challenge, especially when you have a look at how different countries rate and assign these things at birth or reassign them later on. It's a complex web. It certainly raised lots of controversy in 2024, and it comes in at number 16, and it won't be the last time we mention the Paris Olympics as we head through this countdown and head into the top 15 events. This has been 24 through to 16. A big thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you jumping on over your holiday period. It's been a huge 2024 as these 24 events certainly let us know. Let us know what you think we've missed. What do you think will come in the top 5? What do you think will come in at number 1? We certainly love your thoughts and your feedback. Make sure, again, to follow us on all of our social media channels. You can now see the show on YouTube every Thursday at 6 p.m. where we premiere the show. It's also available on Spotify. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok to keep up to date with all of our content as we proceed into the 2025 sporting landscape with all of your black and white on sports. No grey opinions. A big thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe down below and hit the bell on the YouTube channel so that you get notifications about all of our podcasts as they come up. And in the meantime, have a wonderful Christmas, have a great new year, and we look forward to bringing you another episode next week.